Bruce Lee, he can, the boss, he has a strong, he has the power. So Fan Dan, he studied from Bruce Lee.
You've seen them face off in Enter the Dragon, but that was just acting. Or so you thought. What if I told you Bruce Lee and Bolo Yeung had a real fight that was never meant for the cameras? No choreographed punches, no dramatic slow-mo, just raw skill, ego, and the clash of two martial arts titans when the director wasn't watching. Most fans missed it. Hollywood buried it. But today, we're digging it up. And the truth hits harder than any roundhouse kick. The fight that never made it to film. Before the cameras rolled. Before the sweat hit the floor. Before Bruce Lee launched into his iconic mirror scene that made cinematic history, there was another fight planned. One that never reached the screen. One that could have redefined Enter the Dragon. It was supposed to be Bruce Lee versus Bolo Yeung. Not in a training hall, not in a dream sequence. A full-on battle of philosophies, skill sets, and physical extremes. But somewhere along the way, that showdown vanished. It wasn't scrapped because it lacked action. It was too powerful, too intense, too disruptive to the storyline Warner Brothers wanted to tell. The original script included a brutal, carefully choreographed fight between Bruce's agile Jeet Kune Do and Bolo's brute force Kung Fu. It would have been more than a fight scene. It would have been a battle of martial art ideologies, shot with Bruce's vision, framed by his control, and performed by two men who didn't fake a single movement. But executives had other plans. They wanted to keep the spotlight clean and narrow. Bruce would fight Han. That was the climax they needed. That was the poster shot. And so, Bolo's role was quietly trimmed down. His screen time reduced. The legendary face-off removed from the shooting schedule. The producers were focused on pacing, on plot cohesion, on Bruce's journey as the solo hero. Not on sharing screen space with a man built like a walking fortress. It was a business decision, but it was also the beginning of something else. Something real. Because behind the scenes, that fight didn't just disappear. It transformed. The choreography may have been cut, but the tension between Bruce and Bolo never left the set. Day after day, as filming continued in Hong Kong, that missing fight hung in the air like electricity before a storm. Everyone felt it. The stuntmen, the extras, even the assistant directors. Bruce was an innovator, fast and cerebral. Bolo was a powerhouse, disciplined and proud. They had mutual respect, but they also had something to prove. And when two martial artists have something to prove, and a ring nearby, you can bet someone is going to throw the first punch. But before the first punch was ever thrown, we need to rewind because Bruce and Bolo were never meant to fight on even ground. Their paths were worlds apart, and that makes what happened next even more unbelievable. The Dragon and the Beast. Before they ever faced off in that private sparring match, before the intensity, before the silence in the training hall, Bruce Lee and Bolo Yeung were already legends, but legends forged in fire from two completely different worlds. Bruce Lee wasn't raised in a temple or a dojo. He was born in San Francisco in 1940, but his childhood belonged to Hong Kong. He was a street kid with fast fists, fast feet, and a chip on his shoulder. His father was a Cantonese opera star, which gave Bruce early access to the world of performance, but the performances that mattered weren't on stage. They were in alleys and stairwells, where Bruce learned what violence looked like when it didn't follow rules. By 13, Bruce was training under the legendary Ip Man, the Grand Master of Wing Chun. But he didn't stay within one style for long. Bruce asked questions that made traditionalists uncomfortable. Why waste energy? Why follow a ritual if it doesn't work in real combat? He studied fencing, boxing, philosophy, everything. He pulled pieces from every system and rejected anything that didn't serve real-world application. This obsession led to Jeet Kune Do, not a style, but a method. Fluid, sharp, explosive, like water in a hurricane. By the time he was in his 20s, Bruce had already flipped the martial arts world upside down. In America, he opened schools that welcomed all races, a radical act at the time. He taught his own hybrid philosophy to students who had never seen anything like it. Hollywood noticed his charisma, but gave him background roles. So he went back to Hong Kong and became a box office king. Now, enter Bolo Yeung. Born in Guangzhou in 1946, Bolo took a very different path. He was never a street fighter or a rebel. He was disciplined, reserved, and methodical. As a child, he trained in traditional Chinese martial arts. His respect for lineage and form was unshakable. But Bolo was also different from his peers in one glaring way: his body. Bolo discovered bodybuilding in a time and place where it was almost unheard of. He began fusing Western strength training with Eastern martial discipline. The result was shocking. By his 20s, Bolo's physique could stop people in their tracks. He wasn't just strong, he was a living sculpture. He won Mr. Hong Kong and held the title for 10 straight years. His body became his weapon. His presence on screen became legendary. He didn't need long speeches or flashy moves. He was power personified. While Bruce was breaking down traditions and inventing a new language of combat, Bolo was perfecting the ancient one and giving it modern muscle. One moved like lightning, the other hit like thunder. And then, Enter the Dragon brought them into the same orbit. Bruce returned to Hong Kong with a mission to create the ultimate martial arts film, a true East meets West production. He wanted real fighters, real tension, and real meaning behind every movement. When casting Bolo as the muscle-bound enforcer for the villain Han, Bruce knew exactly what he was doing. He was building not just a film, but a battlefield of ideas. But what no one predicted was that this casting choice would spark something much bigger. Bolo had idolized Bruce, but he was not there to be a sidekick. He was there to prove that power still mattered, even against speed, even against innovation. And Bruce, he respected strength, but he believed the mind would always beat the muscle. They didn't hate each other, but make no mistake, they were rivals from the second they met. Their chemistry on screen was magnetic, but it was what happened between takes that made the crew whisper. Every roundhouse, every side glance, every quiet moment in the training tent felt like a fuse burning towards something bigger. But if you thought their differences were just personal, wait until you see how those styles collided. The ultimate style clash. If you asked anyone on set what made Bruce Lee special, they'd say it before you even finished the question: speed. Not just fast for film, fast for reality. He moved like film footage played at double speed. One moment he was standing still, the next he had closed distance, struck and reset. No wasted movement, no telegraphing, just sudden, surgical execution. Bolo Yeung was the opposite. He didn't move fast. He didn't need to. His strength was the kind that made you second-guess your next breath. When he hit, things broke. Bags, boards, bones. There was nothing flashy about him. He didn't try to impress. He just stood there like a human avalanche, waiting for the signal to fall. But it wasn't just physical. Bruce's fighting style was rooted in his philosophy. Jeet Kune Do was built on minimalism, adaptability, and directness. He believed in stripping away everything that didn't serve a purpose. He rejected rituals and embraced efficiency. Bruce studied psychology as deeply as he studied technique. To him, the fight was won before the first punch. He read opponents. He flowed around attacks. He created openings where none seemed to exist. Bolo followed the old ways. His discipline was forged in repetition. Traditional forms, repetitive drills, the kind of training that turned movement into reflex. He didn't believe in shortcuts. He didn't believe in improvisation. He believed in mastery through endurance and in overwhelming an opponent with unstoppable force. His style wasn't flashy. It was inevitable. When they trained on set, the contrast was unavoidable. Bruce hit the pads like a sniper. Quick, accurate, gone. Bolo hit them like a wrecking ball. Loud, heavy, final. One used speed to avoid being touched. The other used strength to make being touched feel like a mistake. And every time they watched each other, there was a flicker in their eyes. Admiration, yes, but also challenge. They weren't competing for screen time. They were competing for something deeper. The unspoken title. The idea of who really stood at the top when the martial arts world wasn't watching. Even the stunt team felt it. Sammo Hung, Jackie Chan, Jim Kelly, Bob Wall. All of them saw the quiet standoff building. Between takes, Bruce would demonstrate lightning-fast kicks, barely missing targets. Bolo would follow with jaw-dropping feats of strength. Slow, steady, brutal. Neither man said it out loud, but both knew what was coming. This wasn't just two fighters with different styles. This was water versus stone. Adaptability versus power. Precision versus punishment. And while their scenes in Enter the Dragon kept them mostly apart, the reality behind the scenes was heating up. Each man knew the other wasn't acting. They were showing who they truly were, through movement, through presence, through control. And as filming neared its end, the air around them became electric. Everyone could feel it. The scene that had been cut was never really gone. It was waiting, just not on the script. And when that tension finally snapped, it happened with no cameras, no crew, and no second takes. No crew, and no second takes. Up next is where the fight you were never supposed to see finally begins. When Bolo threw the first challenge. No cameras, no lighting rigs, no stunt coordinators calling the shots. Just two men, two philosophies, and a room heavy with unspoken tension. What began as a trimmed script and a missed opportunity was now evolving into something far more raw, something inevitable. The final week of filming Enter the Dragon was approaching. Long days of choreography, intense shooting schedules, and rehearsals had left most of the cast physically drained. But not Bruce, and not Bolo. If anything, they seemed sharper, hungrier, as if something unfinished had been pulling at both of them. Bolo knew the scene that would have pitted him directly against Bruce was gone, but he also knew what that fight represented. It wasn't about screen time, it was about legacy. In martial arts, especially in circles where respect is earned in sweat and bruises, there's a difference between a scripted battle and a real one. Bolo had spent the past few weeks watching Bruce dismantle sparring partners, impress studio heads, and command attention with his rapid-fire strikes and intellectual explanations. He respected it, but he also wanted to test it. The challenge wasn't loud. Bolo didn't storm onto set or call for a fight in front of a crowd. That wasn't his way. Instead, it happened after hours, when most of the crew had gone home. The sun had dropped behind the Hong Kong skyline, leaving the outdoor training area bathed in shadow. A few martial artists still lingered: Bob Wall, Jim Kelly, a young Jackie Chan watching from the sidelines, barely known yet. They were exchanging techniques, comparing notes from the day's shoot. It was casual, relaxed. Then Bolo stepped forward, not with bravado, not with trash talk, just a simple statement, almost too calm. "I want to test something." Bruce didn't flinch. He didn't need to ask what Bolo meant. In their world, those 5 words said everything. This wasn't a grudge match. It wasn't about ego. It was about clarity. Bolo wanted to see what happened when his power collided with Bruce's precision without a script between them. For a second, the small group around them fell silent. No one interrupted. They knew what this meant. Bruce looked at Bolo for a long moment. His expression didn't shift. He simply nodded once and stepped into the center of the mat. No gloves, no gear, no fanfare. Just Bruce in a sweat-soaked tank top and loose trousers stretching his shoulders. Bolo rolled his neck and bounced on the balls of his feet, his body like a coiled spring. There was no need to say who would go first. No coin toss, no bell. The silence itself was the invitation, and just like that, the real fight began. There were no shouted instructions, no audience, just the subtle creak of floorboards and the rhythmic breath of 2 men who had waited weeks for this moment. Bruce opened with a series of small, calculated movements. Light steps, probes, feints. He was testing Bolo's reactions, looking for patterns. measuring tempo. It wasn't flashy, it was chess in motion. Bolo didn't react to the bait. He stood grounded, his stance wide, his breathing steady. He had fought hundreds of men before, many of them bigger, faster, younger. He knew Bruce would move like a blade, but he also knew that if he could just get close, just once, his power could shift the momentum in a heartbeat. And that's when Bruce struck. It was fast, too fast. His lead hand snapped forward in a blur, tagging Bolo's shoulder. It wasn't meant to hurt. It was a message. I can touch you when I want. Bolo responded with a heavy forward push, closing the gap, attempting to corner Bruce. But Bruce slid out of range, turning his body at an angle that made Bolo swing wide and miss. Another point to Bruce, another lesson in efficiency. But Bolo didn't stop. He adjusted, pressed in again. His kicks were low and heavy, designed to punish the legs and wear down Bruce's movement. One grazed Bruce's thigh with enough force to stagger a lesser man. Bruce winced, but kept his balance. He responded with a sidekick that landed squarely on Bolo's ribs. The sound echoed off the walls, a smack like bamboo breaking. The next 30 seconds were a blur of exchanges. Bruce used his speed to score multiple taps, each one more confident than the last. Bolo remained composed, absorbing hits, waiting for that one clean counter. And then it came. Bruce committed just a bit more than usual, a rapid combination that left his torso briefly exposed. Bolo saw it, seized it, and landed a palm strike that knocked Bruce back several feet. For a split second, everything froze. Bruce rubbed his chest, nodded, and smiled. He wasn't angry. He was impressed. This wasn't just a sparring match now. It was mutual education. Bruce began to ramp things up. His footwork became sharper, his punches faster. He switched rhythms, changed angles, and broke every predictable pattern. Bolo responded with raw determination, throwing body hooks, shoulder bumps, and brutal low kicks. But no matter how hard he swung, Bruce was always half a second ahead. Then came the turning point. Around the 8-minute mark, Bolo's breathing deepened. His massive frame, built for strength, began to slow. His strikes, while still dangerous, grew easier to anticipate. Bruce saw the shift, and like a shark that smells blood, he pressed forward. His strikes came faster now, snapping jabs, darting kicks, everything sharp, everything deliberate. Bolo gave ground, not out of fear, but fatigue. His body had reached the red line. His will hadn't, but that didn't matter. Bruce's conditioning, built on brutal hours of cardio, flexibility drills, and non-stop motion, now gave him the edge. Bolo launched one last desperate charge, trying to pin Bruce to the edge of the mat, but Bruce sidestepped cleanly and swept Bolo's lead foot, sending him briefly to one knee. It wasn't a knockout. It wasn't a finish. But it was a moment that said everything. Bolo got back up, nodded. Bruce lowered his hands. No taunt, no victory dance, just mutual respect. The small group that had gathered clapped quietly. No one said who won. No one had to. The fight was over. But the ripple effects of what happened that night would be felt long after the mats were rolled up. What the fight revealed about Bruce's philosophy. The match was over, but no one walked away casually. Even after Bruce and Bolo exchanged nods, shook hands, and disappeared into the cool Hong Kong night, the air around the training area remained heavy. Those who had watched stood still. No one dared speak too soon. What they had just witnessed wasn't a gym fight. It was a clash between two living ideas, and only one had left standing without exhaustion. For days after, whispers spread through the Enter the Dragon set like wildfire. Not in gossipy tones or locker room bravado. These were quiet, wide-eyed conversations. Sammo Hung reportedly said it was the cleanest display of adaptability he had ever seen. Jackie Chan, still just a stuntman on the sidelines at the time, later called it, "The moment I realized speed and intelligence could defeat muscle every time." It wasn't about who hit harder. It wasn't about who was tougher. The fight's outcome was clear, but it wasn't the strikes that left the biggest impression. It was the philosophy behind them. Bruce Lee hadn't just won, he had proven something. And that was always the point. From the very beginning, Bruce had been a thinker. He studied combat, not just to fight, but to understand. He wrote constantly. He drew diagrams of movement patterns. He annotated books by Nietzsche, Krishnamurti, and Sun Tzu with scribbled margins and fight theories. To him, martial arts wasn't a path to violence. It was a path to truth. That sparring match with Bolo became a living experiment. Bruce had long claimed that traditional forms, while valuable, could be limiting. He didn't believe in static stances or rigid techniques that couldn't adapt under pressure. He believed in what worked and nothing else. The match proved it. Bolo was stronger, bigger, just as committed. But he moved within a system that could be predicted. Bruce didn't. His footwork constantly shifted. His rhythm changed mid-fight. He refused to give Bolo what he wanted, consistency. And that unpredictability made him untouchable. But there was something deeper going on beneath the footwork and strikes. Bruce Lee's greatest weapon wasn't his speed. It was his detachment. He didn't need to win. He didn't fight to prove superiority over a man. He fought to test ideas, to explore movement. While Bolo came into the sparring session with a warrior's pride, Bruce walked in with the mindset of a scientist. The moment he identified Bolo's breathing rhythm, his stance preference, his strike recovery time, the match was his. And yet, when it ended, Bruce didn't celebrate. Because the victory wasn't over Bolo. It was over limitation. That's what separated Bruce from every other fighter on the set. Even when he sparred, even when the stakes felt personal, he was still searching for insight. He used every fight to learn, to challenge himself, to reshape the system in real time. That is what Jeet Kune Do was, not a martial art, but a rejection of martial orthodoxy. Bolo, for his part, showed something just as important. He didn't quit. He didn't storm off. He didn't make excuses. He nodded, respected what had happened, and took the lesson to heart. In fact, years later, Bolo would refer to Bruce not as an opponent, but as a teacher. That single word, coming from a man with Bolo's pride and stature, spoke volumes. It wasn't humiliation. It was respect for something rare, something higher than technique, something truer than just fists and forms. The crew noticed a change, too. After the fight, Bruce became even more focused. Not cocky, but focused. He spent more time writing between scenes. He filmed the final mirror sequence with a clarity that stunned everyone. It was as if the fight had helped him settle something inside himself. And the training tent changed as well. Stuntmen began asking him deeper questions, not just how to throw a better sidekick, but why a certain strike mattered, why a movement should come from the hips, why flow was superior to form. Bruce wasn't just teaching punches anymore, he was teaching perspective, and they were listening. Meanwhile, Bolo doubled down on endurance training. According to a few accounts, he started asking Bruce about certain drills, about breathwork, about recovery time. He never abandoned his strength training, but he adapted. Slowly, quietly, like any true student would. The fight never made the film, but it didn't need to. What happened between Bruce Lee and Bolo Yeung didn't belong to Hollywood. It wasn't for slow-motion cameras or dramatic lighting. It belonged to the few who saw it and to the philosophies it represented. Bruce didn't need a trophy. He didn't need applause. His win was silent, internal, and complete. The principles he had written about, argued for, and bled over were now proven in one perfect 10-minute storm of motion and control. And for the rest of his life, no one who watched that fight ever questioned him again. But what about those who weren't there? What about the world that only saw the movie? We'll break down how this secret fight influenced Bruce's final scenes and why so few people realized the truth was right in front of them. The hidden fight inside the final scene. Most fans think the climax of Enter the Dragon happens in the mirror room. Bruce Lee alone, surrounded by glass and shadows, hunting down the villain Han in a disorienting maze of reflections. But what most people miss is this. The fight that Bruce lost in real life never appeared on screen, and the fight He won. That one was hidden in plain sight. The sparring match between Bruce Lee and Bolo Yeung wasn't just a personal test. It became a blueprint, a message, a secret thread woven into the fabric of the film itself. Because when the studio cut their fight scene from the script, Bruce didn't just move on. He rechanneled that energy. He took what happened between him and Bolo, the raw speed, the exhaustion, the unrelenting push for dominance, and buried it where no studio executive could touch it. Bruce's confrontation with Han isn't just about good versus evil. It's a psychological battle. Han, like Bolo, is bigger, slower, intimidating. He swings with power. He tries to corner Bruce. He relies on his strength to overwhelm, just like Bolo did. But Bruce is quicker, sharper. He slips away, he calculates, he controls the pace, just like he did when the cameras weren't rolling. Even the environment is symbolic. Mirrors reflections of what is real and what is illusion. Just like in his philosophy, Bruce had to destroy the false image to strike the real enemy. The symbolism wasn't accidental. It was Bruce's way of telling the truth without needing permission. That scene was personal. And for those who understood what had happened off-screen, it was unmistakable. Because Bruce didn't need to win the sparring match in front of the world. He already had. And he immortalized it the only way he knew how, through movement, through film, through a performance so clean, so exact, that to this day it's studied frame by martial artists and directors alike. After the film's release, Enter the Dragon became a cultural supernova. It wasn't just a hit, it was a revolution. Martial arts exploded into global consciousness, and at the heart of it all was Bruce, his philosophy, his movements, and his legacy. But what so few understood was that behind that polished final product, behind every crisp edit and expertly choreographed strike, was a silent nod to the man who pushed him further than any other during those chaotic weeks in Hong Kong. Bolo never got his big scene in the movie, but he got something maybe even more powerful, a role in shaping one of Bruce's most unforgettable moments. Their sparring match, brief as it was, forced Bruce to distill everything he believed, to prove that speed, adaptability, and precision could overcome even the most overwhelming strength. That fight wasn't a detour. It was a mirror, and Bruce stared straight into it and came out clearer. Bolo, for his part, never tried to rewrite the story. He didn't go on talk shows. He didn't brag. In interviews, he always praised Bruce, always referred to him with respect, always acknowledged him as a master. That humility said more than any headline ever could, because Bolo knew what they had done, and he knew what it meant. And maybe deep down, Bruce knew that the fight being left out of the movie was the best thing that could have happened. If it had been filmed, it would have become another choreographed spectacle. Clean, marketable, safe. But as a hidden chapter in their real lives, it became legend. Untouched, unfiltered, true. Today, there are only a handful of people alive who saw it happen. Most of them never speak of it. Some believe it should remain private. Others simply say it can't be described in words, but its legacy lives on in Bruce's footwork, in Bolo's evolution as a performer, and in the philosophy that still shapes how martial artists train, fight, and think all over the world. And maybe that's the point. Not every fight needs an audience. Not every victory needs applause. Sometimes, the real impact comes after the silence, when you realize what you witnessed was not just a fight, but a moment where two legends collided, tested each other, and left changed. Enter the Dragon was Bruce Lee's final completed film. He died just days before its release, never seeing the full weight of its global success. But if he had, maybe he would have smiled knowing that the moment that pushed him the most, the moment no one was supposed to see, helped shape the legacy that would never die. And somewhere, in a quiet training room, a fight that wasn't scripted still echoes. Not through words, but through movement, through philosophy, through truth. Now, you know the story the cameras missed. The real fight between Bruce Lee and Bolo Yeung didn't make it into the movie, but it made it into history. Two styles, two ideologies. One unforgettable moment. A fight witnessed by few, but echoed by many, who understand that real mastery lives in the shadows, not the spotlight. If you believe more people should know about this hidden chapter in martial arts history, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Who do you think would win in their prime, Bruce or Bolo? And what does your martial arts philosophy say? This isn't the last story we're going to uncover. So, stay tuned, because legends leave behind more than movies. They leave behind truth. And sometimes, truth fights harder than fiction ever could. Don't forget to like and subscribe on our channel. See ya!